Welcome to Work World Writing, where we always vote for better writers. I want to mention a little bit about the 3P's. If you haven't seen the video, you can click here. But 3P's are a powerful grading system that I've used for the past 10 years. They grade for what should be graded for, which is student engagement or their participation, student progress, that's their learning, and student performance, which is the quality of their work. But what I really like about it is it's actually a grading system that promotes learning. So if I look at a calendar really quickly, sometimes I have used the 3P's just to grade a smaller project, that only took a few days. But the 3P's work the best when I grade a larger learning period of time. But I also get the students to grade themselves, get them involved, and they're trying to grade for those 3P's. And then I look at the evidence and I can agree or disagree with the grades. But I understand that that is an alternative grading system. And some people just are not ready for the 3P's. So what I want you to do is pull up a cup of coffee, and I'm going to try and give you some suggestions on how to move towards a better grading system. So the first one I want to share with you is using multiple assessments. If I only use 2 or 3 assessments to try to get a clear picture of a student as a learner, it's just not a clear enough picture. Think about a chess player. If I want to determine what kind of chess player you are, but I only let you make 2 moves. It's not very realistic. So I want to use multiple assessments to get that clear picture. Imagine if I was trying to figure out what kind of a teacher you were, and I only looked at a couple classes that you taught. And sadly, that's usually what happens, but it's not very accurate. I should come into several classes and talk to the students and talk to other teachers and maybe even talk to the parents to get a better picture of what kind of a teacher you are. So if you are an instructor that maybe only uses a couple of assessments, maybe a midterm and a final, what I would do is get copies of that assessment. Maybe you have one in case someone misses a test or something. Break it up into pieces, give it to the students beforehand, let them try those assessments, give them feedback on it, and then let them take that assessment again, and that'll give you just a more accurate picture of the student. And that's really what we're looking for, is that accurate, clear picture of the learner. Some instructors will say to me, but Brian, I want students to experience tests. I want them to go through that stress and the reality of taking a test. First of all, tests really are only a school, they just exist in kind of a school setting. They're not really a realistic thing, but it doesn't matter. If you really want students, if you really care about students learning how to do tests and experience tests, then do a unit on it. Take some time off and teach them how to take bubble tests and teach them how to take those standards tests. And then get back to the more accurate assessing. When it's time to assess, I need to do it as accurately as possible. And sometimes these bubble tests are not really accurate assessments of the student overall. The reason why I use multiple assessments is because otherwise I'm really just getting one picture of one day or maybe 2 days. Again, there's so much learning that happens before, during, and after that I want to capture all of that when I make a judgment call about a student's abilities. The next step I can take towards better assessment would be looking for trends. And so this is just looking for consistencies in behaviors and accomplishments and strengths and quality of work. And it's really important to actually communicate to students that is what you're looking for. So instead of taking low results and high results and averaging them together, that's not really realistic. I wouldn't do that to a teacher, say I'm going to take your worst teaching days and your best teaching days and kind of average them together to say that you're some kind of average teacher. Instead, we look for trends. And it's really important to tell students that you're actually grading for the trends. So for example, I'll take myself for instance. If I was to tell you that I'm a B+ teacher or a 77% teacher, it doesn't really help you understand what kind of a teacher I am. We have no idea. But if I can talk about trends, and here's my accomplishments and my strengths, the quality work that I do, it actually is quite empowering because now I know it's language that I understand. I know how to make some improvements, and I kind of have this control over myself. I know if I behave in a certain way, it can impact my own grades, and ultimately it's going to impact my learning. So trends, I think, are really important. Some teachers, when they think of trends, they just want to chop off all the lowest numbers from their grade book. This is not a good move. Students have a hard time understanding sometimes how they're graded, especially when we use weird mathematical calculations with weightings on assignments and things like that. If you can use trend language and look for those strengths and accomplishments and quality work and are you getting things done and all that kind of stuff, again, it's so powerful for the students as far as improving their grades and then improving their learning. I want to move away from this, confusing them with I'm going to chop off low assignments and things like that. Instead, focus on those trends, behaviors, and accomplishments and strengths and things like that, and you'll notice that the learning goes up and the grading is a lot easier for the students to understand. Next one I think is use grades that can replace, understanding that some grades can replace other grades. So if I have a student doing an assignment on one day and they get a C+ on it, and then later down the road after they've learned a bit more, they're doing the same assignment, they get a B+, well that B+ should pretty much replace that C+. And it's just another step you can take towards better assessment. Another one would be grading with exemplars. And so, for example, I'm just thinking science, and this would work in any class, but if I want students to perform a task or something, I might lay out the entire project. For this example, I'll use the water cycle. And I've laid out this, here's an example of an actual completed assessment or task, and here's why it's an A, and I'll spell it out. Usually with the students, we'll figure out why this is so good. Then I'll take a same project, but it's a little less quality perhaps, and I'll spell that out why it deserves a B. I'll do the same for the C. Now students can start assessing themselves, pushing themselves, and this is not a rubric. It works a lot better than a rubric. In fact, I don't even use rubrics because students don't usually use them properly, but exemplars work really well. Student can self-assess and push themselves, and then this is just for one project perhaps, but you can start using exemplars for trends again and start saying, what are A quality trends that I can use in a science class or a writing class or a math class, for example. And students can assess themselves on larger periods of time instead of just little assignments. And then if they want to give themselves a B, a student can explain why they don't maybe deserve an A, and then start setting some goals as to how to move towards an A. Now I'm using exemplar trends. And if you're getting into this, you're almost completely ready for the 3Ps. Next thing I would do is start to question all the assessments that I do. I went through all this. It's very empowering for the teacher. And so I've met some teachers that just assess everything, all the experiments and chapter questions and homework and tests and all the things they've colored in notebooks. Every single thing they do, they've attached marks to it. And now teachers are then sometimes tempted to keep students busy and just keep giving them stuff to do. And then they motivate the students to do it by throwing marks at it. And then they got to calculate all the marks together. And there's some real big questions surrounding that. You know, where's the motivation? Are we focusing on learning at all, or are students just doing things? Then you have other instructors that say, oh, I'm only going to use a few assessments and they're going to be traditional and approved assessments instead of assessing for everything. I was there as well. I started looking at my course outcomes, and I mean, look at some of these words: illustrate and discuss and describe and investigate, construct. Sometimes my paper pencil little bubble sheet didn't really assess for these things. Maybe a conversation would be better in some cases. And so I started to question, am I really assessing for what I'm supposed to be assessing for? I think the one that hit home most, though, is when a grade 8 student came up to me right after a test. The test was about water. They were supposed to explain why water has a high heat capacity, but they gave me the answer for why water surface tension is high. And after the test, they said, oh, they just realized it, and I could see them in their mind. You know, they're thinking about water and trying to explain it, and they started to explain it to me. And I knew that they knew it, but I was like, well, you know, the test is over, and if I let you change your answer, I got to let everybody change their answer. The student knew that they knew it. I knew that they knew it, but the assessment that I was using was so restrictive that it actually robbed the student of the truth and the reality of the situation, that they actually had learned something and they weren't getting credit for it. So that was kind of tough for me to do that to the student, but it was a really good learning situation, and it pushed me towards a better grading system. If you're interested in any of this stuff, or you're trying these things, you probably are ready for the 3Ps, and it's just such a great grading system. It gives you the right language that students can really understand, and it grades for the things that are really important: participation, growth and progress and learning, and then that performance. Leave a comment. I'd love to talk about this stuff with you. Thanks for listening.